Welcome everyone to Smartling's Global Ready Conference. In this session, Navigating Translation in Regulated Industries, we'll discuss the most impactful factors that set regulated industries' translation requirements apart from other translation industries. My name is David Perret. I'm the General Manager of Life Sciences here at Smartling, and I've been a specialist in regulated industries for 16 plus years. Joining me today is Florian Fess, co-founder and managing director of Slator, and Alex Edwards. Alex, hello. Senior analyst from Slator. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for joining. And now AI is undeniably transforming the translation industry. And today we're going to discuss the trends and challenges and opportunities, and then specific ways that companies are effectively harnessing AI in their own right in regulated industries. And the stringent criteria that sets regulated industries apart is really one of the drivers of how they're approaching use of AI. So let's begin exploring some of the practical applications and strategic considerations that we see shaping AI in the driven future for translations. Florian, let's start with you, your experience. It'd be interesting to hear your perspective in this area.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's great to talk about this topic. Personally, before my time with Slator, I was selling mostly into the regulated industry, and some of my key accounts at the time were CROs, but also large sponsors. So it's very interesting to speak about this. Of course, things have changed a lot in the past, 5-10 years, given the advent of AI. There's various ways you can leverage AI in the regulated industry. So providers like Smartling, for example, can enable a client to train generic models like specialized in the life sciences with life sciences or also other regulated areas like legal and financial content, incorporate this into custom LLMs to improve accuracy and output for regulated translations, right? That's kind of the overarching promise here that we have. Now, if you strip away a bit of the kind of fanfare and hype, you need a partner like, for example, Smartling, who can really help you customize based off of your translation memory, right? Translation memory is a key content repository that many users in the regulated industry already have built up over 5-10 years. So it's an absolute kind of treasure trove of data. So train generic models, use custom data on top of it. And then, of course, one key aspect here would be reliability. Right? I mean, if you're in regulated industries, you have things like PII, like personally identifiable information or protected health information that you want to mask. You don't just want to kind of train some model on that data. That's, obviously there's legal aspects to that. And you want to make sure that you can handle this in a secure and kind of data protective compliant way. And one final point where AI will also come in, because deadlines are always short. And they're always going to get shorter, right? For example, we have clinical trial regulations, for example, in the European Union that make everything super tight. And so you have turnaround days of, a couple of days, and AI can help there as well. And I'm sure we're going to get into more details there.
For sure. And great points. Thank you. One of the things I realize is that the acceleration that we've seen lately with the advent of ChatGPT and all of the other big technologies that have hit the stage, so to speak. And we were recently at a conference in Florida last month for Scope and speaking with a lot of industry professionals. And just as recently as a few years back, there was a resistance to using AI. Now at this conference, hundreds of different attendees have said to us they're expecting AI to be in the mix. So they're looking to advantage and leverage these technologies across the board. So even in that clinical space you mentioned, it's becoming more and more of an expectation. And then we look at the trends that we see. So different folks who have different perspectives on that. One of those areas is like a translation as a feature. So they have the systems to control a trial, and they're looking at integrating translation as a feature. Can we talk a little bit about, how that would impact, the overall and what you've seen in that way?
Absolutely. So the Scope conference, just to from my understanding, that was the summit for clinical ops executives, right? That was in
Exactly.
Florida. All right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very good gathering there. Yeah. So look, translation as a feature is something we've started tracking about a year ago when a lot of these AI models were starting to get integrated just generically in companies, number one, but also a lot of broader kind of software as a service offerings would start to offer specific translation features within a non-translation kind of content management or other environment, right?
Mhm.
And so
Right.
let me give you one example. For example, Oracle has a clinical trial suite for pharmacovigilance, and I think it helps you process, analyze, and report adverse events. And they launched a translation kind of feature within that very kind of niche application that they have. So this Oracle Argus system enables users now to translate content written by medical practitioners about adverse events. I think it was launched, Alex, when was this launched? In like
It was around
October?
October, yeah, October last year.
Okay. And it does like a couple of dozen languages, right? So it's
Yeah.
kind of very deeply embedded in that legacy suite. Now, sure, it can do translation, but do you want to rely on it? It's basically it just does an AI translation, like a quick translation. There's no oversight from native speaker or professional linguists. I guess there's an inherent risk in not getting that content checked. So that's, for example, one example, the Oracle one. There's also another one that just came out. I think Microsoft launched like the Dragon Suite, like a much broader suite of healthcare targeted solutions there, and translation. They featured this as one of the things that it enables as well. But I would just kind of say a word of caution, like as these large language models are implemented across thousands of different software applications, you want to make sure that you don't rely on something that's not proven and that's just added because people can add it because LLMs can translate, right? So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily enterprise grade from a linguistic standpoint.
Yeah,
Mm.
there's a challenge there between speed, accuracy, and responsibility. So responsible use of
Correct.
AI. And I think back about 4 years ago when I was involved in translating all the SAEs and AEs, the pharmacovigilance for the COVID vaccine, and when that came out, and what a difference the technologies that we're using at Smartling would have made if we had it back then. It's that recent that the development is accelerating, and the utilization for responsible use of AI could have, some days we had 2,000 SAEs within the actual program. So those were all done, with human in the loop, like you're saying, with a machine translation. But now, by training the model specifically for what we're looking for, we're getting much better, more accurate results in that first pass. It's really changed things in that way.
Yeah, I think as well, with translation as a feature, you've got these generic tools that, are drawing on different models for translation, but the benefit of having a specialist like Smartling, like many others, is that you have the translation memory data. That data is highly specialized. You can have that to, improve LLM output, and you're significantly mitigating that risk of having low quality output by using existing linguistic assets, for example, and not relying on just a generic model.
Yeah, I mean, the benefits that we could talk about, I just want to open that up for discussion, cost, speed, accuracy, and then overall, I think when data is flowing that quickly, like in a large pharmacovigilance program, it's the control aspect. Because when these engines are engaged, all that data is retrievable, accessible. So linguistic quality, you can have automatic LQM linguistic quality management within the system. And then that's reporting on a real-time basis. So when you have a global program and there's so much data flowing through, those control aspects are important. And Alex, I know some of your research has brought out some of that interesting information. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. A while back now, Cactus Life Sciences, they actually did a independent study on the translation quality for medical publications from Japanese to English, just to really understand what the cost benefit and speed benefits were of actually using AI. And predictably, they found that it was super fast. That was great, but the quality wasn't up to standard, as you could probably imagine.
Mm. Yeah. I think about the holistic program. and looking at human in the loop and using a strategic kind of specialist to bring that quality up. Then, as we keep mentioning, those digital assets, the translation memory, and everything that we're building becomes more and more useful. So if you have a linguistic quality measurement like an MQM, within the system, that can really bring out quality, on an increasing basis. So as content is flowing through, it's being used to build. And those linguists that are reviewing the content before it's distributed or assessed, I mean, for data, for outcomes, that becomes more useful information, and more accurate as they go. So I think the quicker turnaround time, regulatory review is also one of the big, aspects that we have to keep in mind. So when that content is finally delivered, after whatever AI technology is applied early on, we can compress those timeframes with the same human parity as a result. So that's also a big quality aspect that we have to look at.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because as we know in the EU, the CTIS for clinical trials and for submission of those documents, those timelines are getting ever shorter, and you do need a quick turnaround time to be able to respond to the regulatory deadlines on time. So if you can use AI to speed up the process, that's great, but obviously with the human oversight that's needed to go with that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of rules and regulations for regulatory submission, and a lot of the machine learning and LLMs that are trained specifically to look out for these requirements. It saves an immense amount of human effort and human time in the mix. So just those kind of rudimentary tasks can be performed and taken off the plate of individuals, contributors. But then at the end, to have that overall review with EU CTR and the CTIS system being in the mix, I think the timeframes are about 2 to 3 days for final revisions. So you can have
Exactly.
up 22, 23 languages, for all the different areas. And then simultaneous submission with human effort, it's difficult. With an AI contributor in the mix, becomes a much more practical outcome. And I think some of these requirements that were put together by regulatory bodies foresaw, and some of my clients actually have said to me, they expect increasing returns and better technology as we go. And they set up a very high standard, and now everyone has to meet that standard. So it's pretty important aspect that they start engaging these technologies. It's not a if anymore. It's a when they will use it. And that's what I'm seeing. The expectation is set that people will have AI utilized in their processes.
And Alex mentioned maybe just let me add one more point about the languages, right? I mean, it's one thing to do the FIGs like the French, Italian, German, and maybe like CCJK, right? But when you're talking about 20, 30 languages, it becomes a lot more complex, not just to get the quality right, but also just kind of the simultaneous nature of it. And then, of course, as you get out of the very high resource languages, the quality tends to deteriorate a little bit as well if you just rely on AI. So yeah, it's a big challenge to get this done in a couple of days, as you said.
Yeah, the challenge is, I think, one of the things we really want to flesh out in our discussion today. So the challenges in using AI, obviously, there's apprehension about any new technology. In the regulatory space, without a doubt, it's one of those palpable, tangible things that you see from client to client. And then the cost to change management. So internally, they have processes set, well-worn. They're used to using, going a certain set of steps to accomplish their translations. But then how do they change over inside? It should make it easier, not more difficult, right? Overall, and that's the goal. And then obviously data concerns, looking at these LLMs and looking at how they specifically use their content and keeping it safe. So you need security, clearances within your company. You need, certifications. You need systems that are, keeping all the content within the system, within the frame, and then not being used to train other engines, obviously, is a big aspect. So I know there's more information available, and that increases our output, from language to language. Like you're saying, the rarer languages are getting more populated in these realms. So the engines are getting better with the rare languages. So there's more of a willingness to embrace the AI technology by more and more companies. But so they need to test, they need to pilot, and then responsibly apply as they go across. But
Yeah, I think the emphasis on testing and pilot is really and doing pilots is really important because I used to work with a lot of life sciences companies trying to implement language technologies on the job, and what we saw with those clients is that they really needed to be able to demonstrate consistent and reliable output for how software behaves essentially, and to have that as transparent and auditable. So you can actually demonstrate that predictability and scalability. And of course, with AI, it can be quite opaque. So being able to pair that AI with translation memory technology, for example, that allows you to have that oversight.
Yeah, and Alex, we came across this case study, right, where the Mayo Clinic published some research on the role of AI and translation interpreting. I don't know if top of mind, can you maybe walk people through this?
Yeah, sure. So the Mayo Clinic, what they did was they took 9 independent studies on interpreting, essentially, um, to understand how effective or how good AI interpreting can be with just translation apps between clinicians and patients. And what they found is across all 9 studies, they had clinicians were expressing their concerns about the output of AI translations, and they weren't really sure about, you know, what they were saying was being communicated effectively in those different languages.
right, right. I do think that there's a way to scale up. And when we look at, the testing of a piece of content or a new program, everything can be done in a responsible way and rolled out. And one of the pieces of advice we do is these POCs at Smartling, the proof of concept, to show what's your workflow look like? What can be automated responsibly so that even the content is secure, it's in the system, it's good. But what manual steps can be eliminated? So it's not an all or nothing approach. You can actually use pieces of AI within sections of your workflow and your processes to expedite the process. So it's famous to say, but all CEOs are looking at ways that they can, use AI to reduce costs and increase performance, making them more competitive in their space. So sponsors are looking at ways, looking at implementing it on their own within their systems, and buying these programs and models and access, and then looking to achieve kind of overall goals in their control of their content through these studies and these programs. In the world of managed care, even with the volume of content that managed care utilizes, I do see healthcare companies looking at machine translation internally and then review externally, which is an interesting concept. So yeah, you're talking about thousands and thousands of pages within a 3-month period for the annual enrollment period that they have to deal with. It's a tidal wave of work. So since government regulations be increased over time, so the number of languages they need to manage are greater and the amount of content is greater, it's no longer really possible to, as one of my friends says, throw bodies at a problem. They have to use the technology intelligently. So it's changing. It's changing greatly.
Just to add on that, you mentioned regulations, and we're still quite in a very early phase of understanding how these regulations are going to play out, and how regulatory bodies like the FDA are going to want to have that oversight into fully automated AI-only workflows or processes. So I think, well, in the EU we have the EU AI Act. We sort of have an idea on that, but I think we're really going to need to have those human controls to ensure compliance and have a really risk-averse strategy to putting drugs on the market or developing health apps and those kinds of things.
Yeah. A lot of clients are asking contractual questions. So how does our content flow through, and what assurances can you give contractually? And you do have to look to experts that are kind of leading the charge, because we already have experience in a lot of the areas that clients are looking to get into. So how do you shore up, and mitigate risk in every which way for your content beforehand? So, in piloting, in looking at these, possibilities and potential solutions that you can put in place, how do you protect yourself as an organization and at the same time take full advantage of the technology that's out there. So, from Slater's point of view, what advice would you give companies looking to get into the mix here? Is there something that you would suggest as a road mapping kind of way forward? What do you guys think?
So we just actually literally yesterday published a new piece of research where we did a quite extensive kind of buyer survey, right? And 50% of the buyers, actually more than 50%, when asked about what type of um, help and partnership they need in deploying AI, they said they need kind of a full strategic AI partner, meaning like, okay, look, we know there's a lot of great stuff out there, but we need somebody to help us deploy this in real life, in like actual workflows, in this case, in life sciences workflows in real life, right? So first, maybe do a quick review of the partners and vendors you currently have, and just make sure that you have somebody who actually understands kind of this end to end and can deliver on that and can be your strategic partner for the next 3 to 4 years, because that's not easy. And then be open to maybe what should be called like controlled experimentation.
Mm,
So things move very quickly. You want to understand what's possible, but you also want to manage your risks, right? You don't want to kind of, you know, just mindlessly jump into the next hype that's out there and implement something that may either be kind of obsolete in a couple of weeks or not be robust enough. So again, a partner should be able to help you manage that. So yeah, it really would start with finding the right partner and then being open to experimenting while keeping risks in mind, especially in life sciences, obviously kind of number one priority right there.
for sure.
Yeah,
Alex, any?
just yeah, to add to that, I mean, obviously, regulated industries are very good at erring on the side of caution, and I think this is just another case of erring on that side of caution. Doing tests, partnering with specialist LSPs, specialized companies, like Smartling, to be able to walk through that process, to be able to have to be able to leverage the specialist linguists and the decades of experience that people have in their own industries, and to be able to partner with them and walk them through the process of how they can effectively use AI. I think that's the best way forward.
Yeah.
I want to just jump in on that. Sorry, Dave. I mean, like having somebody like yourself who's been in this for, 15 years is essential. Like if you go to a lot of these new fancy technology companies, like what would they know about life sciences, right? They may have the AI, they may have the translation, they may have the language aspect to some degree, but they don't really understand the industry and kind of the vertical industry. And that obviously is extremely important to deploy something like this, because the language part is one, but actually understanding the industry, the pain point, like how a clinical trial is run, the different phases, the different pitfalls, the different security risks there is essential. So yeah, that's certainly a key part in this as well.
You raise a good point because the challenges haven't changed on the client side. That mountain of work that needs to be pushed through in a short window of
Correct.
time. So when you've walked through the fires with your clients, as I have for all those years, they look for that experience to be applied to the new technology, right? So the challenge. So what can the technology do for that challenge in particular, right? That exact challenge. So the upside of having, costs about half what human translation would be and still having the same quality, the speed, the turnaround time being halved with current day technology, and it keeps getting better. At Smartling, we apply a CI/CD process, so that's continuous improvement, constant delivery. So the CI/CD process means that we don't wait for a new version of a program to come out or a platform. It's
Mm.
constantly being developed. And with the pace of this, fast-paced environment we're in, you really need to have that expectation of your provider. So combine the experience with always up-to-date, never out-of-date technology. And then you've got kind of a good game plan going into using AI. I think that's helpful. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up the session today? I think this has been pretty helpful. I really appreciate all your input.
Yeah, just to reiterate. So, I mean, again, partner, leverage your existing assets, and keep the risk in mind. I guess that's a couple of good closing words here. Thanks so much for having us today, Dave.
Thank you. Alex?
Yep, short and sweet are on the side of caution. I think that's the key takeaway, and definitely partner with specialist providers.
For sure. Well, thank you guys. It's been a great conversation. Really appreciate it. We'll stay tuned to Slater and all your research. It's been so helpful to our industry, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.